In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts and experiences with using Switchbot's S10 robot vacuum cleaner for the last 7 months or so, and what you can expect if you do decide to pick one of these things up. Check it out. What's going on, guys? I hope you're all doing well. In this video, I'm not going to be running through the main technical specifications for the robot, so I'm not explaining how the navigation works and all the main features like its 6,500 Pascal amperes of suction power. I'm pretty sure that's what it has, but I'm not running through those details. You can watch that in somebody else's video or read up on Switchbot's website. Instead, what I'm more interested in giving you is my thoughts and opinions with actually using this thing, so what you're going to get if you purchase one of these and how well it might work for you. If you're currently sat there thinking, Mark, how have you tested this thing out for 7 months, being as though it only released a couple of months ago? Well, let me explain. In December time, Switchbot actually reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in checking out their upcoming S10 robot, and I of course said yes. The S10 is their second robot vacuum, with the first one being the K10 Mini, and this thing is a tiny little robot that can get into all the nooks and crannies that standard robot vacuums can't. And with the S10, this was going to be their full flagship model. It could do all of the things you'd expect from high-end robot vacuum cleaners, all the cool obstacle avoidance, the self-emptying, and also mopping, but if you're a fan of Switchbot and you follow Switchbot's products, you'll know that Switchbot always like to add that little extra thing. Take their contact sensor, for example. With a contact sensor, it's got one primary job. It can tell you if there's contact between 2 points, so you can tell if something is opened or closed. With Switchbot's contact sensor, they also added some additions to it, so it has a motion sensor and also a button. That button can be used to trigger various Switchbot-based automations or do other things, and with the inclusion of the motion sensor, you can first tell if there's motion and then contact, or if there's contact then motion. So as with any other Switchbot product, Switchbot did the Switchbot thing and they added some uniqueness to the S10 to make it stand out and also be different from all the other high-end robot vacuums on the market. They took the robot's charging station, which on high-end robots will often do a few things. It will self-empty the robot, it will obviously charge the robot, and usually it contains some kind of water tank if it's got a mopping functionality that will empty the dirty water and give the robot clean water. And this is the part where Switchbot focused, and they took this one dock and they turned it into 2 docks. With the S10, you get 2 docks, or as Switchbot calls them, stations. So you'll get the charging station, which will do the usual chargy thing. The robot will go to this to charge up, and it will leave this, and that will be its kind of home point. The charging station will also self-empty the robot, so anything that the robot sucks up will be emptied into a dust bag inside of the robot. And the charging station also has a little heater on the bottom, so after the robot's done mopping, it will also dry that little mopping brush. The second station is the water station, and we'll go through this in a little bit more detail in just a second, but the water station is a separate station, and what's cool about this is the fact that this thing can be plumbed directly into your mains plumbing, and it will actually provide and take away the dirty water from the Switchbot. So it doesn't provide it with dirty water, it gives it clean water from your plumbing and empties the dirty water. You may have noticed that I didn't mention any power or wiring, and that's because the water station doesn't require it. There's a small internal battery inside of the water station, and when the robot docks to it, it charges it up, and that gives it enough power to perform all of its needed water station functionality. And this is a really cool thing that Switchbot have done by allowing it to not need any kind of power, because it just gives it a bit more flexibility in terms of where it can be placed, and you can just focus more on getting it somewhere where you've got decent plumbing or somewhere that's actually useful and convenient for you to actually have it. Back in December, when I had the original unit of the S10, Switchbot were very adamant that the only way to use this robot and make use of all of its mopping functionality would be to use the water station, but they have actually revised this now and they have came up with an attachment that can be added to the water station that will allow it to use the clean and dirty water by making use of little water tanks that sit on top. This can be purchased as a separate edition, which I think retails for around £80, so this might be a nice attachment if you wanted to have this robot and have all of the features and functionality, but you didn't want to plumb it into your mains water. I think if you are buying the S10, you're buying it to have that full autonomous mopping capability, so you don't want to have to worry about water tanks, you don't have to be worrying about the smell or cleaning things, you want that to all be managed for you. Typically, I tend to always not like the mopping features and functionality on robot vacuums, just because it always seems to be a bit of an afterthought. Some robots do it well, but there's so many that just do it not well and not good at all. I really hate when they just add the little wet wipe to the bottom of it or the little mopping pad and it just gets dragged along and they call that mopping, because it's not really mopping and it doesn't really do a good job. Switchbot themselves are actually guilty of this wet wipe sin because they included this as a feature on their K10 Mini. Now, obviously, having a wet wipe be dragged around is obviously better than not having one dragged around, but I wouldn't really call it a cool feature or something innovative because you could just stick a wipe to your robot and call that a feature. But they've obviously taken this and they've thought about it and they've given us the water station, but they've also revised and redesigned how their mop works. Typically on robots that are higher end, they'll have these spinning circular mop pads that will either vibrate or they'll have the ability to add a bit of pressure and push down. Take the Eufy X9 for example. This is a robot that I previously reviewed and this one does exactly that. It's got spinning mops that press down and the force of that pressure gives it a nice scrubbing edge to help clean your floor. Rather than just copy the competition or do what everybody else does, Switchbot instead redesigned this, so they never use the spinning mops. Instead, they've opted to make use of a roller brush mop. This roller mop is definitely unique to the Switchbot, and it's not something that I've seen on any other robot vacuum as of yet. You can tell that this is definitely something that they've thought about, and it isn't a wet wipe solution, and it has had a bit of thought go into it. You can tell this just by the way that the brush is put inside of the robot. There's a small plastic side that lifts up to actually give access to the brush to allow it to be put in and released. Having the separation of the charging station and the water station that's powered by your mains plumbing, and even the different styled mop, is actually quite a genius move by Switchbot. It's new, it's innovative, and it is very interesting, but it's not perfect. As I mentioned, I've had the S10 for over 7 months now, so I've got quite a good idea of how well it works, what it does well, and what it doesn't do so well. I should also mention that I've actually had 2 units of this robot. The first unit that I had was an early pre-production unit, so this one arrived with no branding, the box and everything was kind of just straight out the factory with no designing on, and then I also got the full retail version. With the original version, there were a few bugs and issues with the software, both in terms of the app and also the robot's navigation, and working with Switchbot with back and forth communication, I was pretty much running daily updates on this thing, and they were fixing anything that I was reporting, so hats off to the Switchbot development team. Switchbot are well known for their simple product setup and installations, and the S10 is no different. After you've taken it out of the box, you'll run through a very simple app process that will require you to just press and hold a couple of buttons on the robot to connect it to your Wi-Fi. With that done, the robot will perform its first initial scan, which will map out the layout of your floor, whether you've got that upstairs or downstairs. Once that's done, the robot will dock and it will then ask you where the water station is if you're opting to make use of one. This simply just requires you to mark on the map where the station is and the robot will do the rest. The actual setup and install of the water station is fairly straightforward, but if it's something that you don't want to do yourself, it is a very simple plumbing job for a plumber to do. Switchbot provide a generous amount of different plumbing fittings and attachments that you can use to connect this up to your mains. For me, in a standard UK home, I've connected this up just near the water for the dishwasher, and then I've connected the actual takeaway water, so the dirty water, just underneath my sink. The footprint of the water station is quite small and it's not something you're really going to trip over or stand on, and for this reason I've placed it in front of the dishwasher so it's not somewhere you're going to typically stand, and then I've got the hoses just going underneath the baseboards and just connecting up underneath my kitchen sink. With your floor mapped and your water station marked, you're good to go and you're ready to start cleaning with the S10. So how well does it work? Navigation wise, this robot performs really well. In my house, it can easily navigate around tables, chairs, it can get through narrow gaps, and it pretty much never gets stuck. It makes use of a camera array and also a LiDAR turret, and that gives it the ability to 3D map and also position itself. And another really cool feature about it is if it's dark, and because it uses this camera-based system to navigate, it turns on a little torch, so that's quite cool to see your robot using a torch so it can actually see where it's going. And although it, as I mentioned, it's got a camera system, that camera system is only used for navigation. There's no facial recognition, there's no video recording or any uploading of any footage to the cloud. If, like me, and you've got a busy household, you won't always remember to go and check the floors or to check all of the places that the robot might go before you send it out, and it will often encounter some toys or things that shouldn't be on the floor. In these cases, the robot has been fine, it can navigate around them. One issue that I do have is if I put a towel down by the back door and I forget to pick this up, the robot will go over it. Sometimes it'll be fine, but other times it might try and eat the towel and it'll get stuck and it will just cry about it. But that's on me to actually pick that up. But if you're like me, what you'll probably do is you'll probably make use of the robot's no-go zones and you'll just mark that little area by the door and tell the robot to not go and clean there, because you probably always forget to pick the towel up. I'm happy that the S10 can navigate around without getting stuck on chairs or tables or toys, and also it can follow these no-go zones that you set. So the no-go zones are just areas that you mark on the map that you don't want the robot to go into. So I actually use one of those areas for my office. So again, sometimes I'll leave things on the floor in the office, but I wouldn't want the robot to come in here and eat them. So I just mark the office as I don't want the robot to go in here, and it gets to the entrance to the office and then it will just turn around as if the room doesn't exist. So all of that side of things work really well. Like many other robot vacuums, the S10 is capable of mapping multiple floors, so you can take this upstairs if you wanted to, and it could map the upstairs, so you can use it upstairs and downstairs, both of which will have separate maps. But as the S10 has the water station, and the water station and charging station have both been downstairs for me, I haven't really found the need or want to actually take it upstairs and use it as a vacuum upstairs as well. In my house, downstairs is all hard floors and upstairs is all carpeted, so I did a little test on the carpet and found it has worked really well on carpet. Upstairs as well, there does tend to be more obstacles with Legos, Barbies and other toys around, and the robot has eaten a few of these, but it is capable of dodging the much larger items like dolls, books and shoes and other things that your kids might leave around. Dodging toys and books is one thing, but dodging dog poops is another, so take it from me. Toys and books are safe to be successfully dodged by the robot, but dodging dog poop is definitely something this robot cannot do. One of my favourite features about the S10 is its battery life. If I send the robot out to do a full house clean, it will usually take around 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the cleaning cycle I choose, and after that it will only use about 15 to 20% battery, so I can easily send it out to do multiple cleans. I typically also only ever use the high suction power mode of the vacuum, because if you're going to have this robot going out, you may as well have it do its maximum. Whilst the robot's out cleaning at its maximum suction, it does produce a fair bit of noise, but I think the trade-off of noise to suction power is worthwhile. I think I clocked the robot at around 70 to 75 decibels, so for me that would be too loud to focus on doing a bit of work or watching TV, but you might be able to block that out. I also have it turned off so that the robot doesn't go out and clean during the night, because it looks quite freaky when you come down the stairs to a loud noise and you can see the robot's torch dotting around your house. On the lower powered suction settings, the robot is quite quiet and you could easily have this going out during the day and you wouldn't really notice it. And whilst we're on the topic of the robot's noise, if you ever do use the mopping functionality, when the robot returns to the charging bay, it will automatically start drying the mop if you've got that setting turned on. If you happen to be in the same room, you'll definitely know that it's on and you'll be able to hear that hum from the dryer and also every time the robot's brush rotates, but it isn't super loud and it's nowhere near as loud as the robot being actually out and cleaning. Switchbot really have done a good job with the navigation on this robot, and if you compared this robot to the initial one that I originally had 7 months ago, then if you asked me then, should I get this, I would be telling you to wait for Switchbot to do the work on it, wait for them to update it, or even wait for them to bring the next version out. But because they have refined it that much, they have done all of that extra work, it really does work. I did say it wasn't going to be a technical video, but the suction power in this robot is 6,500 Pascal amperes, which is very high in terms of robot vacuums, so it's got no problem picking up Cocoa Pops, little bits of crumbs, dirt, dust, husky hair, human hair, and just all the usual things that you might find on the floor, or usual things that I would find on the floor in my house. The robot makes use of just one spinning brush on the front and one roller brush to actually do the pickup and collection of the rubbish, but all of this stuff gets picked up nicely and I don't really have any problems with the actual suction power or collection of the robot. The S10 makes use of a rubber anti-tangle brush, which is definitely an improvement over the traditional bristly roller brushes, but I will say it is anti-tangle and not tangle proof, so The roller brush does still collect up bits of rubble and hair and bits on the ends of the brush, so every now and then the robot might report that it is stuck or the brush is clogged, but this is just one of the maintenance things that you'll have to do with your robot. And again, this is going to be varying on depending on the kind of house setup that you have, but it's anti-tangle and not tangle proof. Onto the mopping then. So if you couldn't tell, mopping is definitely a key feature and a key selling point of the S10. The fact that you've got this separate water station and the ability to not have to worry about mopping and changing the water, that is definitely a big feature and a key point for the robot. But how well does it work? Well, in all of the testing and my experience with it, I'll say it works okay. It's definitely not perfect and there is room for improvement, but it does do a good job. If you switch your robot to the vacuum and mop mode, the first thing it will do after leaving its charging station will be to go to the water station and fill up on water. It will then proceed to start vacuuming and mopping at the same time. Once it's completed vacuuming and mopping, the S10 will return back to the water station where it will wash the roller brush, it will empty out any dirty water from the tank, and then it will return to the charging station to recharge. Whilst it's on that charging station, it will also dry the mop to make sure that no bacteria grows and also to make sure that the mop doesn't stink. Footprints, paw prints, sticky marks and spills all seem to be no problem for this mop, especially on the hardwood floor. I found that on the slate floor, usually it takes a couple more passes for it to actually get the marks up, and often I'd have to set the vacuum to be the wet mode as opposed to just the standard one in order for it to perform better on my kitchen floor. Now this probably is because the floor is not as even as the solid flat wooden floor, but it does still perform quite well. The main way that I've been using my S10 is by pressing the button on the contact sensor on my office door, and when I press this button it triggers a Switchbot automation which first puts the robot into its maximum clean mode. It will then go out and do the whole vacuuming of the downstairs, it will go back and it will wait for a set period of time, and then after this it will go back out again and it will switch to the mopping mode and it will do the vacuuming and mopping, and that way I know that the floors had a sufficient vacuum before it's done the mopping as well. There's several pros and cons of the mopping functionality for this robot. The biggest pro is the fact that it's autonomous. It will change that water itself, it will do all of those things and manage that extra mopping headache for you. But the biggest con, I think, is the fact that the way that this roller has been designed, the way that it's been placed. The roller is kind of dead center to the robot, so the fact that the mop is in the center gives you this big border around the edge of the robot. So when it does do mopping, especially on hardwood floors, you'll see the areas that the mop can't get to, and after a couple of weeks or a few days even, you'll actually see the space that's cleaned with the mop and the space that isn't. If I could make a suggestion or a change for Switchbot, maybe this could be a future version of the robot or even just a new attachment that we could get, it'd be the ability to swap out that roller mop. So instead of the smooth surface that it currently has, have one that's got the little stringy, bristly bits on. I'm not actually sure what you call it, but the reason I'd want this is because on my standard hardwood floor, the standard mop head that you get, that all the surfaces of that touch at the same time. So the smooth surface works perfectly on a flat floor, but in the kitchen where I've got the tiles and there's a little groove between them where the grout is, this doesn't get in there perfectly the same as it does on a flat floor. If you had this bristle brush, then I think that would actually hit the floor and target all those areas a little bit better. For me, the ability for the mops to self-empty using the mains plumbing definitely outweighs the cons of it missing a few bits or even leaving that little border. For the border, I could go around and manually mop this after a couple of days, and that's not really a big issue for me. I'd much rather the dirty water gets chucked away down the sink and it's something that I don't have to worry about and manage. Another con for the water station, I would say, is the way that Switchbot have designed the cleaning solution. So on top of the water station, there's a small hole that you can put cleaning solution into that will get injected into the water that goes into the robot. So it should give the floor a bit of a cleaning solution to help clean up bacteria and probably just add a bit of a nicer smell. With this solution, Switchbot do recommend that you only use their cleaning solution, just because the solution might damage the internals or the hoses or any of the parts of the water station. Obviously, Switchbot recommend that you use their solution, and there's nothing stopping you just using some off-the-shelf solution and just pouring a bit of solution straight in there, but because you can't see if it's doing any damage and you may have spent over £1,000 on this robot, I'm not sure if it's something that you would want to risk. Let me know in the comments below if you purchase this, if you do make use of your own solution, or what your thoughts are. My final con for the water station is every now and then after the robot's filled with water, it will leave the water station and there'll be a small puddle of water. Now, I think this is definitely something Switchbot are aware of that happens every now and then because they provide you with this flimsy little bit of plastic which sits in front of the dock, ideally to catch this little bit of water, just so it's not marking your floor. This could be an issue for you and should be something that you're aware of because over time, especially if you've got a wooden floor, this could damage your floor. Connectivity and control wise, you've got three main methods for controlling the robot. The first method is for using the buttons that are situated on top of the robot. This will allow you to send the robot home, send the robot out in whatever cleaning mode it's in, and also switch cleaning mode. The second method you've got is using the Switchbot app. Using the app, you can control all of the features of the robot, you can view statistics about it, you can view when things need to be changed, and you can just manage the robot overall. The third and final method you've got for controlling the robot is using your voice. So with this robot, you can expose it to voice assistants such as Amazon Echo, and then you can use your voice to tell the robot to start and stop. You can also make use of these third-party solutions to control the different elements of the robot, so you can set up your own routines to change the levels or set up your own schedules and cleaning patterns. What about Home Assistant? Well, if you're looking to get this robot to integrate it into Home Assistant, then you're not really going to be able to do that. Switchbot do have Matter support for this robot, but you will need to make use of their Hub 2, and using the Hub 2 you can expose the S10 over Matter by using that hub, and Home Assistant can pick this up and control it. Currently the actual Matter specification for robot vacuums isn't there, so although you can expose it and get it into Home Assistant, you do only get that on and off control. So yes, you can get it into Home Assistant by using Matter, but you do only have access to on and off, which might be enough for you, but you don't get any nice statistics such as any of the components' lifespan or what the robot last cleaned or any of the other good bits of information that you might want. Overall, the S10 is a nice rounded robot vacuum. It's got a good feature set, it's extremely reliable, and it's got some really interesting and unique mopping capabilities. If those features and functionalities sound interesting to you and not having the full Home Assistant experience isn't something that phases you, then I'd definitely recommend checking this robot vacuum out. And there we go, that's been a little look at my experience with the S10. If there's any features that I didn't cover or there's a particular bit of my experience that you want to know a bit more about, then be sure to let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop me a like, and if you're not already, hit that subscribe button and ding dong the notification bell. That way you'll be alerted to any future video that I do. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.